All right, let's get started. This is lecture 17. Actually, that's too loud. And we are going to continue talking about economic and climate shocks. So in lecture 16, just before the midterm, we talked about the UG article in Nigeria. Is it louder today than usual, or is my hearing like bionic? Feels a little bit too loud. Hold on. How do we do this? Is that better? Can you hear me now? Is that good? Okay. Good. Okay. So we're going to continue talking about economic and climate shocks. And we're going to talk about some work that's in the book Economic Gangsters on Poverty and Witch Killing in Tanzania. That's going to be the main focus of today's lecture. And then we're going to move on in the next lecture after spring break talking about instrumental variable methods. But in what I'm discussing today, I'm again going to kind of hint at some of those methods or how they relate to what we're doing, just to familiarize you guys with what we're going to do next time. And then the fourth lecture in this section is going to be by Marshall Burke, who's finishing his PhD at Berkeley this year and who's doing work on income shocks and HIV in Africa. So again, as I mentioned last time, kind of ties together some themes. Another thing that I realized would be useful, if you're interested, I gave a talk which is very much along the lines of this block of the course, the 4 lectures for this block, at TEDx Berkeley like a month ago, called Climate, Conflict, and African Development. And it's really short and actually covers several of the papers in this section and kind of gives you a broader overview. So you're going to get a lot of this content in the lectures, but it's just a very simple kind of introduction to it that you may want to see. Okay, any questions before getting started? Let me do a quick poll. We don't need to do it on the clicker, just on the midterm to get feedback. Too easy? Oh, maybe we should do clicker so people are honest. Okay, we're going to do a clicker poll. Everybody's like, I can't do that in front of my friends. Okay, clicker poll. I'm going to ask about how easy or hard it was and how long or short it was. Okay, so one is too easy, or on the easy side, let's say. 2 is like just right. And 3 is too hard. And then this would be like also like when I ask the next question, like too short, too long. Okay, so let's have you guys first do how hard or easy. 1 is easy, a little on the easy side. 2 is kind of just right. 3 is a little too hard. And yeah, that's a really good point. I really meant A, B, and C. Thank you, though. Extra credit for you. Okay, another just 5 seconds. Okay, so in terms of easy, hard, okay, so most people thought it was kind of in the middle. Slightly more too hard than too easy. Okay, now let's do it again for long, short. I know these are going to be correlated, but you could just click in again for too short, just right, too long. Just trying to get a sense. Okay, I think everybody clicked in the exact same answer. Okay, so this one was more like a little bit too long rather than, okay, good. Thanks, that's really useful for the final. Oh, too long that the exam was too long is what I was thinking. Oh, you thought it was too long, the amount of time was too long, so the exam was too short. See, survey. This is like an applied class in survey design. You never know what kind of data you're going to get. Okay, very good. So I have no idea if it was too long or too short, but I think a lot of people are in the middle. So that's good. I'm feeling like maybe it wasn't way too easy or way too hard. Okay, great. Any other questions before we get going on today's material? Yeah. This shirt's from Sierra Leone, but there's no story, not yet at least. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's do it. We're going to continue talking about rural communities. We talked about Nigeria last time, about these farming communities and how households deal with their financial needs. They need money up front to plant. Where do they get it? In Nigeria, they were basically getting it from their friends and neighbors and relatives. But we made the point last time that in cases where maybe the whole community or the whole region gets hit by extreme weather, some of those coping mechanisms, the informal lending among neighbors, won't work as well because no one will have money. And then the question is what happens to communities then? So we're going to study another poor rural community, this time in western Tanzania called Meatu District. It's actually a pretty isolated community. It's on the far western edge of the Serengeti National Park, which is a massive game park. And it's not that densely populated, and the roads are really bad, and there's no, there's an old railroad that goes nearby, but basically it's a very geographically isolated area. Tanzania is one of the 15 poorest countries or 20 poorest countries in the world, and even by Tanzanian standards, this is a poor district. So it's actually one of the poorest districts in Tanzania. And when we got survey data about 10 years ago, per capita income not in PPP terms, just in sort of foreign exchange terms, was really low. It was like $200, $250 in per capita terms. So that's really poor. It's a poor area, and it's an area that's hit by a lot of droughts, and I'll show you the data on that. So once every 5 to 6 years, a village in this area says they have an extreme drought. Now, recall when we talked about the Bloom and Sachs article, that frequency of extreme drought isn't unprecedented at all. There's a lot of settings in Africa that are semi-arid where you have a drought on average once every 5 or 6 years. In terms of what's grown, there's a lot of sorghum and millet, which are traditional African crops, which tend to be pretty drought resistant. So in areas where there is a lot of drought, you tend to see a lot of these crops, but they're also not as high yielding in terms of calories and nutrition as a number of other crops. And the main cash crop is cotton. So there's actually tons of cotton grown in this area. There are cotton buying companies. There's little cotton ginneries in this area as well. So there's like a little bit of industrialization around processing the cotton. Basically, cotton is before you process it, it's just so bulky, it's so fluffy, and it takes up so much volume that it's not practical to ship it. You almost have to gin it, it's called. You have to process it, take out the seeds, take out lots of fibers, and pack it in before you ship it. So that's why there's that kind of industrial activity. And I think something like 2/3 of the households in the sample, or 70%, grow cotton. So that's really the local cash crop. This is the location of Meatu on the map, the little red circle there in Tanzania. So it's sort of on the other side of Lake Victoria from Busia district, which we studied in Kenya, and sort of on the western side of the Serengeti Game Reserve. This is a picture of Meatu after harvest. So this is long after the rains. It even gets much drier than this, but this is like a few months after the rains have stopped. It is dry there. It gets really, really dusty. When you drive around for more than half the year in this part of Tanzania, there's just dust everywhere on the road. When you bike or drive or take a motorcycle around, it's so dry that there's just dust everywhere. You have to cover your eyes from all the dust. And this is just like the kind of village center. Like there's not a market going on right now, but on other days there might be a market kind of in this space of this village. Okay, so another interesting fact about this part of Tanzania, and the reason why I started collecting some of this data, I was working on a different project originally, and I started some data collection in the area, then I expanded the data collection. Because there's another interesting fact about this area, which is there's a lot of accusations of witchcraft in this part of Tanzania, and a lot of people are attacked for being witches. And we're going to talk about why that may go on and what the economic connection is to that. And in particular, when things go wrong, certain people are accused of being witches and causing the misfortune. That's basically how people in this part of Tanzania conceptualize what a witch does. A witch is somebody that basically uses their magical powers, however you want to put it, supernatural powers to cause misfortune to others. And witchcraft isn't something that's unique to this part of Tanzania. There's very widespread witchcraft beliefs throughout sub-Saharan Africa and also many other parts of the world. But throughout sub-Saharan Africa, across religious groups, there's a lot of witchcraft belief, and a lot of it is tied to traditional religious belief. You could see a lot of beliefs about witchcraft as being very closely tied to traditional views of supernatural power, you could say, so religion. So how exactly does it happen? There's a view that, and again, this is widespread, and anthropologists have studied this for a long time, that witches are fundamentally very jealous people. When other people maybe are doing well, they want them to fail, so they sort of cause misfortune. They use their magical powers to make their crops fail. They use their magical powers to make people sick. They use their magical powers to make you fail an exam. Almost any sort of misfortune, but you can't use that excuse in this class. I won't buy it. But it'd be creative. Basically, witches use their magical powers to cause all kinds of misfortune. And so in many different realms of life in sub-Saharan Africa, people are concerned about witchcraft. Before soccer matches, big soccer matches, different teams may have someone on their team who's kind of responsible for warding off witchcraft heaped on them from the other team. That's pretty common. There have been African political leaders, presidents, that have used a lot of symbolism from traditional religion or witchcraft as sort of symbols of power. Yeah. Yeah, so the notion of who has these powers is really interesting. So there are people who are traditional healers, they would be called, who also claim, and in fact it's really like traditional doctors would be the term in Kiswahili, who claim and people believe have powers to fight witchcraft. So in other words, you could use these supernatural powers for good or evil. The people that use them to harm others are called witches. The people that use them to sort of protect others, and you would pay these traditional doctors, traditional healers, they wouldn't be called witches. So there is a notion that you could have these powers and use them for good or evil. You could have these powers and you could kind of turn one way or the other. So that's people's conception of it. There's very interesting, we're going to get to some of the gender distinctions here, but almost all those accused of being witches, not all, but almost all accused of being witches are female. The traditional healers are male or female. So there are female traditional healers and male, but and we'll come back to why that may be the case as well. But there's a notion that you can learn these powers or be trained in these powers, or maybe some people are just born in these powers. And there's a lot of symbolism and signs that people will use in the natural world to tell them whether witchcraft is at work. Hyenas are very closely associated with witchcraft. If you see a lot of hyenas, people will think there's some kind of witchcraft activity. So there's this incredibly intricate, developed system of basically religious belief around these powers, is the way to think of it. Now, of course, like any sort of supernatural or religious belief, it's sort of impossible to disprove to people that, to prove to them that there isn't witchcraft if you don't believe that there's witchcraft. When something bad happens, they attribute it to these kinds of witchcraft phenomena. Sometimes they go to a traditional healer and things sort of maybe get better on their own, and then they attribute it to the work of the traditional healer, but you can't really disprove it that easily. Go ahead, yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of research within anthropology almost called syncretic religious belief, which is the merging of traditional religious beliefs, many of which are grounded in witchcraft, with either Christianity or Islam. And so you have this coexistence in people's churches and mosques. In this part of Tanzania, as I'll mention, the majority of people are not Christian or Muslim. They just believe in traditional religion. So it's in some ways a very traditional part of Tanzania. But even those who have at least formally become Christian or Muslim retain a lot of belief in witchcraft. And a lot of people understand a lot of the imagery within Christianity, within the broader East Africa region, understand a lot of the imagery around the devil and whatnot in terms of witchcraft belief. So there's this kind of connection that's made, these parallels that are made between traditional beliefs and practices and traditional beliefs and practices, which is exactly what happened with European Christianity. There's all these sort of, so-called pagan, pre-Christian, Germanic religious traditions that work their way into European Christianity as well. So it kind of happens whenever these religions spread, as they kind of adopt the local beliefs. Any other questions just on the big picture around these beliefs? Okay. So the part of Tanzania we work in this project is dominated by a particular ethnic group called the Sukuma. And within Tanzania, and actually again within the East Africa region as a whole, the Sukuma are known as, this area is just a hotbed of witchcraft beliefs and traditional healing. So if you're in Kenya, you'll often see signs along the road or in different towns, advertising for traditional healers, and they'll say traditional healer from Tanzania. Like people in East Africa say, okay, the Tanzanians kind of understand this witchcraft belief. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but this part of Western Tanzania is like the hotbed of these beliefs. And it's also an area where, the kind of missionary religions, Christianity and Islam, haven't spread as much. So in our data collection about a decade ago, 2/3 of respondents were neither Christian or Muslim. That's, the 64% following traditional religions today in East Africa is extremely high compared to other areas. Almost everybody, say, in Busia, Kenya, is Christian or Muslim. Like 99% the same. Like 1% will be like, no, I'm still kind of following traditional belief. But in this part of Tanzania, which is more isolated, where there's this particular ethnic group with a very strong traditional religious belief set, it's different. So these beliefs are taken very seriously by people, and not just people who follow traditional religion. I was always, and I probably shouldn't have been surprised, but in my own interactions with friends and colleagues and field staff that we were working with in this part of Tanzania, was always a little bit taken aback by how strongly people believed in traditional, witchcraft beliefs or religious beliefs. Even people with college degrees or advanced degrees, many of them kind of believe just as strongly in the underlying witchcraft beliefs as anybody else. So, how common, so this is witchcraft beliefs, but the manifestation of these beliefs that's particularly troubling is, in this area, in addition to lots of belief about witchcraft, there's also a lot of witch murders and attacks. So there's some official government data, which is almost certainly an underestimate, that suggests there were thousands of witch killings in this part of Tanzania in the 70s and 80s. In our own data, which has 67 villages over about a decade, there was an average of about 1 witch murder per village over this period, and about 1 witch attack meaning like a non-fatal attack. So roughly every 5 years or so, on average, in these villages, there's either a witch attack or murder. And these are villages of only a few hundred households. So it isn't like it's a big city, so yeah, there should be something. It's a small village, and once every 5 years or so, almost exclusively, an old woman is attacked as a witch. So the actual murder risk, annualized murder risk, for old women is really high. That's a very high annualized murder risk. And this is like witch killing murder risk. So it's very common for witches to be killed. When I was doing fieldwork on this project, I was really interested in how younger women who are not yet usually targeted saw this or thought of this. I talked to a number of younger women, some enumerators, some respondents on how they viewed witchcraft beliefs. And I expected them to say, gosh, this is terrible. All these women are being killed. We have to have some solidarity with these old women. I don't want to be targeted myself. It was totally the opposite. It was like, if these are witches, they deserve to be killed. Men said that, women said that, old people said that, young people said that. It was just staggering at first to me. But of course, it's so deeply ingrained, these views in traditional religious belief, that maybe it's not surprising people would feel it very, very strongly. But it wasn't, we're going to see that it's almost only women who are targeted. So in that sense, this is really a gendered crime. But it wasn't the case that there was enough activism or consciousness among the local female population trying to fight back against this. It was sort of like even 25-year-old women or 20-year-old women were like, oh yeah, they're witches, they deserve to be killed. It was a hand up, yeah. I'll come to that in a second, how the mechanics of it work. It's not a communal village witch hunt the way you think. I'll tell you exactly what it's like. Did you have your hand up? Oh, sorry. Okay, so this is just some of the data. Again, roughly once every 10 years there's a witch murder, and that's half of all murders. If you look at total murders, it's 0.2 per village per year, and 0.09 is witch murders. Half of all murders in this part of Tanzania are witch murders. So it's like a major crime category. It's not some esoteric thing. It's sadly very common. And again, just highlighting what I showed you before, once every 5 or 6 years there's an extreme drought or flood, extreme rainfall, of which most cases are, most cases should be drought, yeah. 2/3 are drought and about 1/3 are flood, yeah. Yeah, so let me answer kind of both of these together, just 2 slides. I want to go in a certain order, but I'm going to get to exactly what the legal status is of this, how people view it. But as you guys are already getting at, given the very strong local support, popular support, even though these crimes are illegal under Tanzanian law, there's effectively no enforcement against them. There's no punishment because people so strongly believe witches should be killed. Some other data, just to contrast with some of the data we've seen so far, average years of schooling in this area is only 4 among adults. That's lower than what we saw, say, in some of the Kenyan data. This is not a very highly educated area. It's more educated than some of the Sierra Leonean data we're going to get into more later in the course, but it's not a very educated area. And again, 64% of people practice traditional religious beliefs. The average village has about 400 households. About 90% of the sample belongs to this main ethnic group, the Sukuma, and the remainder are divided between a few smaller. So who are these witches and what happens? And this is just getting at these very good questions that came up. Almost all the victims are female in our data. So we went around to these 67 villages over a couple of years and collected both current and sort of recall, past data over the previous decade on all these witch killings to try to get enough data to do some analysis. And we asked questions to the local village leadership about all the major crimes in the village, all the different types of murders, as well as witch murders and witch attacks. And I remember the first time I was piloting these questions, I was really nervous. How are people going to receive this question? Are they going to be upset at me? Are they going to kick me out? Are they going to shut down our whole survey? And it was really, again, staggering and surprising, but it had just happened that in this village, a few weeks earlier, there had been a witch killing. So when I asked the local village council head, the village executive officer, the VEO it's called, when I asked the VEO and some of his village council staff what had happened, or whether there had been a witch killing in this village, he said, oh yeah, there was one just 2 weeks ago right over there, like pointing at a house just down the road. So people were just totally open to talking about it. And in fact, in some villages, it was almost like a sense of pride. Like in our village, we take witchcraft seriously. Witchcraft harms people. It destroys their crops. It makes them sick. It does all these things to people. And we make sure witches don't destroy our community. We're tough on crime, basically. That was really the view towards witchcraft. Again, if you believe the mechanism, if you believe they're witches doing terrible things, wrecking people's lives, then maybe the response isn't as crazy as otherwise. So they're almost all female. They tend to be older than average. So in this part of the world, living to 58 is non-trivial. There aren't tons of 80-year-olds floating around. So the average age is 58. So they're kind of late middle-aged, older women on average. And the victims tend to come from poorer than average households. They tend to come from households with little land, few assets. So that was one of the hints in beginning the data collection that poverty was part of the story. We're going to flesh that out today in terms of what extreme poverty can help us explain. The other thing that helps us explain that maybe it was extreme resource scarcity that matters is most of the victims are killed before the harvest in what's called the hungry period. So there's a period of a few months of the year when a lot of people's food from the previous year has run out, but before next year's harvest. That's called the hungry period. That's actually when a lot of the killings occur. So basically, we're in one of the world's poorest countries, in one of its poorest districts, looking at some of its poorest households in the part of the year where people are running low on food. These are extremely poor households. They are on the edge of subsistence. And in bad years, I'll show you, there's going to be an increase in these witch killings. That's going to be one of the patterns that I'll show you. So here's some of the data. This is just highlighting the ownership of household goods among the victims. None of the victims were seen as being coming from well-off families. Some of them were about average, but the vast majority were below average in terms of their ownership of assets. Similar patterns for ownership of livestock. The ownership of land, they were more in the middle. The other thing that comes out here that you can see is almost everybody has relatives in the village. And when I started reading up on this and trying to figure out what was going on, I talked to people in Tanzania and they gave me some sense of what was going on. But I was lucky that there were actually a number of prominent anthropologists who study African society, including Tanzania, who have studied these kinds of phenomena. And the patterns that come through in their analysis is pretty clear. So this is not a communal witch hunt situation. There weren't trials. The women who are killed as witches are almost always, according to the anthropologists, killed by relatives. Very close relatives. Sometimes people living in their own home, literally their own house. Sometimes close kin living nearby. There's a famous Dutch anthropologist called Peter Geshere who studies witchcraft actually in Cameroon, so another part of Africa, who calls witchcraft the dark side of kinship. He calls it an intimate crime. It's a crime between people that are very closely linked to each other, relatives, very close kin. And the idea here is people, when they face misfortune, often blame those closest to them for their misfortune. In this case, it tends to be older women. The kind of stereotype in Tanzania, if you were to call it that, of a woman killed as a witch is an older widow. So an older woman whose husband has passed away, who's maybe not that productive on the farm anymore. She's kind of defenseless in some ways. Go ahead. So very few of these women will have lots of land, so the view is that that may not be a central consideration. And in a couple slides, I'll come to there is an economic mechanism, which I'll come to in a couple slides, but you're getting close to what I'm getting at, yeah. Completely. Now I'm not, okay, there's 2 things. What you're saying is completely right in terms of how people view the death of spouses in many parts of East Africa. In many parts of East Africa, when a spouse dies, everybody immediately says, the wife poisoned him.